Okay, I've been wanting to make some cab curtains for quite some time, and I really didn't know how to go about doing it. And I discussed it with my wife, who is a quilter and paper crafter, and she had a few ideas about how to do it, and she suggested that I use this muslin fabric and some of her paper crafting tools to help make it easier to do. So right here you see that I'm showing you a piece of muslin fabric. It's just a real expensive fabric, but it resembles canvas and it's very inexpensive. You can probably go to a fabric store and get a yard of it for a few dollars. And but the little square there is that I showed you there in my hands a while ago is about 6 inches square, and that's probably enough for 10 or 12 locomotives, maybe more. It takes very little. Right here, I'm using the scoring tool in the scoring board to press little lines into the 1 inch by inch and a half inch piece of muslin. This will give me a guide to know where to make the folds. And so you just lay the fabric on there, you go up and down each groove in the scoring board, and I'm using the small ball on the tracing tool. So you just kind of press them along until you get the lines grooved in there, and that will be where you end up folding the fabric to simulate the side curtains. So after you get the fabric folded, I start making, I believe it was about 5 folds, and you just kind of grab it like I'm doing now and fold it over on that first uh, scribe and get it as straight as you can. And if you make a mistake, you just kind of undo it and um, do it over. Now this little tool right here, this is a quilter's seam presser, and it works really good for ironing without any heat. So after I fold the fabric over on that first line, I hit it with that wooden presser, and it makes that lay down pretty good, just kind of like you would if you ironed it with a hot iron. But it's a lot easier to use this wooden tool because these pieces are so small they would get lost under a regular iron. So after I make the first fold, I fold the next one in the opposite direction and get it lined up and then hit it with the seam presser again. And it just takes patience. You have to kind of take your time and make your folds as evenly as you can and press each one as you go. So we're just continuing on here, making all these folds on the scribe lines that we did with the tracing tool. And like I said, this piece of fabric was 1 inch by inch and a half, and I made the grooves in the 1 inch direction. And you don't really need that whole inch and a half to make one side curtain. You actually probably only need about 1 inch by inch, but I like to make it 1 inch and a half because that gives you something to hold on to when you're trying to manipulate the fabric, and gives you something to anchor. It gives you a little extra fabric to anchor fabric while you work on it. And you can always go over it again as many times as you need to get everything to lay down. You will notice here that as we work the fabric, it begins to fray a little bit, but we will be able to trim that off later, and we'll be able to take a little bit of the glue that I need to tell you about, this special glue I'm using here in a minute, but we'll be able to take that little bit of glue and secure those edges where they won't continue to fray. But for now, while you're doing all this, you can just kind of keep zig and zagging these folds back and forth until you get about 5 of them done. Now you'll have 2 raw edges, and I do enough folds so that the raw edges go to the inside of the towards the cab opening. That way the raw edges don't show as bad, and it just looks a little better. Now this is a clear ruler that belongs to my wife, and it is very good for laying down over a piece of fabric that you need to cut, because you can see right through it and see what you're doing. I'm having a little trouble with this small rotary cutter because the blade doesn't extend quite far enough to allow for the thickness of that ruler. So I'm going to change over to a bigger rotary cutter here in a little bit. But I'm placing it on the mat here. Each one of these squares is 1 inch. And that's just about right for most steam locomotives. So here we have our first little side curtain folded up and ready to go. Now I'm going to be starting the other side curtain, and I'm making the folds for it same way as we did before. And what you're trying to do is have consistency to where the folds on one curtain are not wider than the folds on the other one. And because sometimes if you're not careful, you'll skip one of those scribes and it'll be twice as wide. So you just got to keep working scribe to scribe. And this scoring board, I understand that it's a Martha Stewart product, which is no longer available, but they do make those scoring boards still. And this one that I'm using is a 12-inch by 12-inch. You don't really have to have that one that big. You could use a 6 by 8 or a 5 by 7, whatever you can find, and it would be plenty big for this project, and probably be less expensive as well because it'd be smaller. The scoring board also has a cutting blade if you were doing this with paper, and it is possible to do this project with paper. I just think that the muslin fabric is almost a perfect color to represent canvas, which is what these steam side curtains were actually made out of. So they look a lot like canvas, and they simulate the color very well, and also the texture. So here I've got a stack of folds that I'm just continuing to mash down, and the top of the side curtain I mash down flatter than I do the bottom half, and I'll show you why that is here in a little bit. But we just keep making our folds, pressing them down, and then you will see me put a little glue at the top to hold the top together. And the reason for that is the side curtains will go up underneath the roll down curtain across the top of the locomotive cab and just kind of tuck underneath it. So we want those good and flat, so we glue those down. And you'll see what I'm talking about later on in the video. It'll make more sense. And when I got left with this piece right here, I had a little extra fabric that I didn't need sticking out. So I just trimmed it off. I first thought that cutting tool was not sticking down far enough, but I think the real problem is it's just kind of dull. So I'm going to change to a different rotary cutter here in a little bit. Here you can see some fraying on the end that I will trim off with these. This is another nice little pair of scissors that my wife has for quilting. They're quilting shears, and they're really good for trimming threads. They're small and very sharp, and you can do some nice fray trimming with those. Okay, right here I'm using some of this glue to put just a little tiny drop in between each fold, and this will end up being the top of the curtain. And once I get the glue in there, I just kind of hold it together for a second, and that glue will set up really quick. Then after I do the top, I go down about halfway, or maybe a little bit more than halfway, and put some more glue in between the folds. And that kind of keeps the curtain together, but also allows it to flare out a little bit at the bottom where the wind would naturally catch the curtain when it was traveling down the road. So you just kind of glue it the way you think it makes it look the best, and just do kind of what you have to do. This particular glue, I'm amazed by. It's called art glitter glue, but my wife uses it all the time in her crafting work. And I got to looking at it, and you can glue wood to wood, paper to paper, paper to wood, plastic to plastic, plastic to wood, wood to metal, plastic to metal. It's really a remarkable little product. I'm not sponsored by them or anything, but I just like to sing the praises of something that I think is a really good product. And it dries really fast. It cleans up with water. But most glues won't glue that many different types of material well. And I have really been impressed with this product. So you'll be seeing me use it throughout the whole video. Now we're going to do the roll down curtain. And I do that on a small piece of wire. This wire is about maybe a 1/16 in diameter. And I just put a little glue about an inch wide right across the wire and attach the muslin fabric to it, line it up real straight, and let it dry a few minutes. Now that it has dried, we're ready to start rolling it up, and I just carefully rotate the wire a little at a time so that I get a nice tight roll of fabric. And you will see that this makes a very realistic looking backdrop curtain for a steam locomotive. Here again, this piece is about 1 inch wide. In fact, the roll down piece fabric is 1 inch by 1 inch. So it doesn't matter which edge you use. Then when you get it all tightly around the wire, put another bead of glue along the edge and roll it into the rest of the fabric, and it holds it really well. Takes a little dexterity with your fingers to get it, but you can get it pretty easily. And then you have a nice looking roll. Then you will see me take this roll of fabric off of the wire because we don't really need the wire. So just carefully pull it off. And that's another great thing about this glue. It holds very well to what you glue with it. You can see I was kind of struggling to pull that piece of fabric off of that wire. But you can undo something that you have glued. And I really appreciate that because sometimes I glue things together that I wish I hadn't have. And with this stuff, you can get it back apart. Now here I've cut off the frays, and I'm putting a little bit of glue on the end to keep it from refraying. And this glue comes out white, but it dries clear, which is another very handy thing to be able to do. So we just kind of seal that up where them frays won't come loose, and that is ready to install on the locomotive. So we got the left and right side curtains and the roll down further across the top. Now we'll show you how to install it on the locomotive. First we do the roll down curtain. And there again, I'm putting a very small bead of glue, the full length, right where the seam comes together, because we're going to put that seam against the cab so it doesn't show. And after I get the glue on it, I just take my tweezers, and most locomotives have little windows up there at the very top, and it just goes right below those windows. And you see that this glue just holds it immediately. You can still take it off and reposition it if you need to, but it holds it almost instantly. And after you get it on there, you just kind of step back and look at it. It may need to go a little bit to the right, it may need to go a little bit to the left. And I've been fiddling with it so much that it fell off, so I'm going to put a little more glue on it. And put it on again. And you can use the tweezers or your finger or whatever works best for you to get it lined up just right. And once you're satisfied, then you can think about putting on the side curtains. And there's a fold down steel plate, walk plate, even with the floor of the cab. And I usually trim my side curtains to come right down and just barely touch that floor plate. And that's what I did. I marked it with a pencil there so I could trim it off. And when I put the side curtain on, I put a bead of glue right down the far edge of the side curtains, full length, and some at the very top. Because you got a very little narrow edge there of cab wall to attach it to. Because there's a window there in the back of the cab wall, and you don't want to cover that window up. You have to cover it a little bit sometimes, but you want to try to leave that window open if you can, where somebody could look through it if they were in the cab. Again, you just keep tweaking it until you get it just exactly where you want it, and everything looks good and straight. And if you don't like it, you can take it off. And I took it off right here because there was a little bit of stuff fraying out that I wanted to trim, because it would be almost impossible to trim it off later. So it's better to get it now. And your glue is probably still soft enough to hold it again without adding any more. I use that glue for so many things since she showed me that glue. It has just been so handy. And you notice that I had a little stand that I put it upside down on in the previous clips, and the glue dries fast. So what's good about that stand is you don't have to keep putting the pin in there and taking it out every time you want to glue something. You leave the pin out and you can put the glue upside down on that little stand, and the tip goes against that pink pad and seals it so that it doesn't dry out. So that keeps it from drying out without the pin in it, and the bottle is always ready to use and never plugs up. So you can just set it up there till you get ready to use again. And now if I was gonna be done for the day or not use the glue overnight, yeah, I would go ahead and put the pin in. But while you're working, put it in that little stand, and you just don't have to mess with that stopper pin so much. And it keeps the glue from drying out. Okay, I'm putting it up there so I can get another measurement where to cut it off. Or maybe I already did that. Yeah, I guess I already did that. So we're just gluing that right side on. And there we go. Now the only thing you really need to do at this point is to weather that canvas a little bit. And but before I'm weathered, I'm going to take a little bit of clear super glue, and I put a drop on my glass work surface there, and I get a toothpick and dip it in that drop on the glass, and I take the toothpick over to the what I'm trying to put glue on. And I'm doing that to keep that from fraying where I cut it, and a little bit on the sides, on some of the edges there on the right side and the left side. Doesn't take very much, just a little tiny bit. Keeps that fabric from fraying. Now here I'm taking a piece of charcoal colored artist chalk, and I've got my X-Acto knife there, and I'm scraping off some powder, and I'm going to grungy up the canvas a little bit. This gets very dirty on a steam locomotive, so we need to make it look a little dirtier. This does a good job of simulating the oil and grime that's all around a steam locomotive. And as the fireman works the engine, he's got really dirty hands. And then he grabs those curtains and gets them dirty and walks by them with his dirty overalls. So they get pretty dirty pretty fast. I also use a little bit on those cab shades. The cab shades came from the installed from the manufacturer, but they were just black metal, and I took some to my paint that was canvas color. I can't remember what it's called now, buff I think, and painted to make them look like canvas. Here I'm scraping off the glue that has dried, the super glue that has dried, with a chisel blade. It comes off very easily. And now we can run the engine by slowly and take a look at the cab curtain. This is a brass model made by United, and we have it lettered and everything for $29.26, which was recently restored to full steam operation. Now these tools that I use, you don't have to use them, but as you can see, they're very handy to use and to get uniform folds. This is the scoring board, and sometimes they're also called a envelope maker because they have the ability to trim and everything when you're making envelopes. Then we have the ball tracing stylus, and I use the small end, and this is a relatively inexpensive tool, just a few dollars, but I don't know of anything. And most of the scoring boards come with a bone stylus, which is really plastic, but I like this ball shape better. You can kind of get up into the ends, into the corners and stuff better with it. And here's the wood seam presser. I don't know what kind of wood that is, but it's very smooth and it doesn't have any splinters or anything, and it doesn't leave any kind of stain or anything even onto the fabric, even though it looks like it's been finished with something. But very handy for ironing out locomotive curtains. And this is the art glitter glue with the standy glue stand. And I added a little magnet up there in the top corner. You can see it, a little round magnet up there. And that gives me a place to put the pin that comes with the glue, because that pin looks like our standard ball head pin, but it's not. It's a special size that will only fit this particular glue bottle, so you don't want to lose it. Here we have the rotary cutter, large rotary cutter, and that makes cutting a lot easier to do when you're trying to make straight cuts. The clear quilter's ruler is also very handy to have. You don't have to have it. You can use a standard ruler, but it's just nice to be able to see through what you're doing. And it has the fractional marking on it where you can see how much you're taking off. If you're trying to just take off a 16th or whatever, you can line it right up and then use your rotary cutter. And of course, the cutting mat is essential for using a rotary cutter. There again, you wouldn't necessarily have to have it for this project, but all of these tools are just super convenient to make the work go easier. Here's the muslin fabric. Um, they make this in different weights, but you really want to get the thinnest that you can get, because you're scaling it down to HO scale, so you don't want very thick fabric. So just get the lightweight, the cheap stuff, and you'll be fine.